The whisper from the empty house. I never believed in ghosts. I was always a skeptic, relying solely on logic. I grew up in a big city, where the supernatural was something for movies. I never imagined reality would twist so grotesquely, forcing me to question everything I knew about the world and my sanity. It all began when I inherited my great-aunt Martha's house. She lived in isolation, deep in the countryside, surrounded by dense forests and an overwhelming silence. I barely knew her. I had just lost my job and bills were piling up. The house seemed like a new beginning, a refuge. I arrived in mid-October. Autumn painted the trees, but the cold, damp air cut through to the bone. The town was tiny, with old houses and narrow streets. Martha's house sat at the end of a winding dirt road, hidden by twisted trees. It was a tall Victorian home, with dark windows and a creaking porch. There was a sadness to it, an air of abandonment that chilled me. As I opened the door, I was hit by the smell of mold and dust, mixed with a strangely sweet scent I couldn't identify. It sent a shiver down my spine. The house was dark, and every step echoed through the wooden floor. The silence screamed. I explored the rooms. Old furniture draped in white sheets looked like silent ghosts. Portraits of strangers seemed to follow me with empty eyes. Time felt frozen. It was as if Martha had just stepped out and would return at any moment. In the kitchen, a dusty kettle and old teacups. In the bedroom, a neatly made bed and a worn book on the nightstand. Everything was untouched. But the feeling that I wasn't alone began to creep in. It felt like the house was holding on to her presence. I tried to ignore it, blaming my imagination and exhaustion. It was just an old house filled with memories and dust. Or so I hoped. The first few days were all about adjusting. I cleaned, opened the windows, and tried to get used to the silence. The moldy smell faded, but the sweet scent lingered, especially in Martha's old study. That room felt heavy, thick with something unseen. I tried to make the place feel like home, but the house resisted. It had its own identity. The first whisper came on my third night. I was reading in bed when I heard a faint sound in the hallway. Soft footsteps, followed by a low murmur. I froze. I waited, but it never repeated. I told myself it was just the wind or the house settling. But there was no wind, and that sound was too intentional, present. In the days that followed, the occurrences became more frequent. Objects moved. My coffee mug would be in another room. The book I was reading flipped to another page. I began to doubt my memory. I couldn't sleep. Every night I lay awake, listening, waiting. Every creak, every knock made me jump. The silence that once felt peaceful became threatening. I caught myself talking to the walls, trying to fill the void, trying to stay sane. I constantly felt watched. Invisible eyes followed me. I'd feel cold breath on the back of my neck. I would turn quickly, but no one was there. Just the silence and my own shadow. One night, I was woken by a noise downstairs. Something had fallen, followed by a dragging sound. My heart pounded. I grabbed a lamp and went to investigate. In the living room, a sheet had fallen off a chair. Next to it, on the floor, was a photo frame I had left on the mantel. The glass was shattered, and the picture of Martha was lying face down. A deep chill ran through me. That frame hadn't fallen by itself. Something had moved it. Something had turned the photo. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, staring at the chair and the frame. The photo of Martha seemed to stare back. I felt a weight in my chest. I tried to be rational, but the feeling that something was deeply wrong overwhelmed me. I began to question my sanity. The isolation, the stress, the lack of sleep, it had to be that, right? The next day, I searched for answers. I went to the local library. There was little information. Martha had been a recluse. People in town avoided talking about the house. Some whispered about strange things, shadows, voices, but never with detail. Just old legends, I told myself. But the librarian, an older woman, looked at me as if she knew more. In a quiet voice, she said some places hold more than dust. They hold echoes. And not all echoes come from good things. She handed me an old newspaper. A small article mentioned a fire that had burned down a house decades before Martha moved in. An entire family had died in the blaze. The date was before the current house was built. The librarian explained that Martha's house was built over the ruins of that home. It gave me chills. A house built over the ashes of tragedy. Echoes, like she said. I returned home, disturbed. Could those echoes be haunting me? That night, the whispers grew clearer. I heard children crying, soft whimpers, scratching on the walls. I curled up in bed, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. But the sweet scent intensified, and I began to associate it with something rotting. Then I saw them. Shadows. Not just the play of light, but dark shapes that darted just out of view. Quick, playful, sinister. They appeared in the hallway, the living room, my bedroom. I swore I saw red eyes staring back at me. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I was trapped, hunted by something I couldn't see but knew was there. I lived in fear of the night. I left all the lights on, but the darkness still crept in. The sickly sweet smell clung to my clothes and skin. I washed obsessively, but it wouldn't go away. The whispers turned to voices, unintelligible but filled with anger and sorrow. A dissonant choir of screams and laughter. I tried reaching out. I called friends and family, but I sounded insane. How could I explain I was being haunted by echoes of a fire? They were kind, but I felt the doubt in their voices. They talked about therapy, vacations, selling the house. Selling? How do you sell a place that feels alive, that doesn't want to let you go? Things escalated. Doors slammed shut. Windows opened on their own. Items were hurled across rooms. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt pressure on my chest. I opened my eyes, and in the dark, I saw a tall, thin figure with glowing red eyes looming over me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. It leaned in, and I felt a cold breath and the stench of wet earth and death. It whispered something in a language I couldn't understand, but it filled me with unspeakable terror. Then it vanished, and I could breathe again. I could no longer pretend. Something was in the house. Something evil. I researched more about the fire. I learned it was a man, his wife, and 3 children. The man had set the house ablaze with his family inside. He survived, but died in the hospital days later with a twisted smile on his face. The local legend claimed his soul never left, cursing the land. I was living inside the personal hell of a madman, and the echoes weren't just sounds. They were the tortured souls of that family. I was the new victim, the audience to their endless suffering, and that sweet, sick smell. It was the scent of burned flesh and death soaked into the walls. I had to leave. The house was draining me, breaking my mind. But every time I tried to pack, The manifestations intensified. Doors slammed. Objects flew. That tall figure appeared more often. It didn't speak anymore. It just stared with a hunger that pierced my soul. It didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to stay, to become part of the nightmare. Another echo in the empty house. One night, it all came to a climax. I was packing in my room when the temperature dropped suddenly. The sweet, rotting smell was overpowering. The whispers turned to screams. The house creaked and groaned like it was on fire again. Shadows danced on the walls, more vivid than ever. I saw burned faces, twisted bodies. Then the tall figure stood in the doorway. It stared at me, and for the first time, it spoke. Its voice was a deep growl, not human. It said one word: "Stay." Terror froze me, but survival took over. I screamed, pushed past it, feeling its icy presence burn into my skin. I ran. The house pulsed around me. I stumbled down the stairs as the shadows closed in. I reached the front door, but it was locked. I turned the knob, but it wouldn't move. Smoke filled the air. The laughter and screaming were all around me. Then I saw the window. I grabbed a heavy chair and threw it through the glass. I jumped, landing in the wet grass outside. I ran through the woods, never looking back. I could feel them behind me, the eyes, the whispers, the stench. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. I collapsed near the main road, where a passing driver found me. At the police station, they listened but didn't believe. Trauma, they said. Exhaustion. I ended up in a hospital, sedated and diagnosed with nervous breakdown. Now I'm far away from that house, but the horror never left me. It clings to my mind. I still smell the sweetness of rot. I hear the whispers. I see the shadows. I can't sleep without the lights on. People say, I'll heal, that time will help. But how do you heal from something that stole your sanity and showed you the true face of evil? That house is still there, waiting, and I know the whispers will follow me forever. This story was shared by someone who claims every detail is true. Whether you believe it or not, there's something deeply unsettling about what happened in that house. And sometimes, the scariest things are the ones we can't explain. If you've experienced anything similar, shadows, whispers, places that felt wrong for no reason, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more real horror stories, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Some houses stay empty for a reason.